If you knew me before, you wouldn't even look my way.
And welcome back to Sullivan's Unheard Voices. Dr. Jami, I'm so glad you're back with us.
Thanks.
I really wanted to have a conversation with you that's a little different than the conversations we've had before. Because here's where I'm at today, right? Because it's just last week in particular, I see these 3 videos that say what autism is, and they're only curating what the producers and the TV networks are saying what they think autism is. There are too many people out there on the spectrum that are not like what the media portrays, that I just wanted to have that conversation with you, because I don't think people realize, yourself included, doctors have autism. Podcasters have autism. It's not like autism is isolated to like the far corners of society. No, like people are everywhere and they're capable. And I hate this idea of when people say autism, everybody looks at it like this infantilization of people. Like, do you feel the same way? Like, does it urge you? Like, does it irk you as much as it does me?
Yeah, no, it totally does. I'm not saying sorry. I'm like, yes, it does. No, don't apologize, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Or did you even say sorry, or am I just conditioned to always think we're always saying sorry?
I always
now
say
am I
sorry.
overgeneralizing by saying, are we always saying sorry? Yeah, like and I don't know, like I joke that, oh, it's my black and white rigid thinking of like, stop saying it's all like this, because it's not. Right. So like, but yeah, and especially like when it's like when the narrative isn't coming from autistic voices, I think is like when it is right. And you're like, here's the unheard voices. Hello. Yeah, because it's like, oh, here's this. And it's like, what do they call it? Inspiration porn. Like, I hate that. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Like, okay, so you only want to interview us if we have some inspirational story, or like, oh, this overcame this, or yeah. And it's just like, why can't you just like interview us for the sake of like what you would interview random stuff? Oh, here you were here when this the Willamette River crested. I don't know, right? Like, I was just trying to think of random things that come up in like Northwest life, but yeah, like I feel like what ends up getting represented in especially mainstream media is just, yeah, it's just like a continuance of like either, I feel like the big ones are like the narrative of the like the inspirational story of like this person is autistic and they had all these high support needs and yet they achieved this, and right, where it's like, look at this story, and and oh yeah, their mom suffered through that, right? Like and hashtag not all moms.
And I have a prime.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I have a prime example of that, right? So, like, I remember a gentleman that I knew up in Washington State where everybody was having this sort of narrative about him, like all of these things about like, oh, you have a job and all this other stuff. But then you talk to this gentleman and he's like, yeah, you're so proud and you're saying he's overcome a lot to be pushing grocery carts for Safeway, but he's got a PhD in engineering. And he's never had a job as an engineer because the autism gets in the way of his ability to communicate during an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're celebrating this huge success that he's getting minimum wage for $25 an hour. And he's sitting here going like, wait a minute, you're missing the real story here.
Yeah.
You're focused so much on the fact that I have a job. I want a job where I can actually live. Yeah. And that's not the story that's out there.
Yeah. And use his degree, right? Like, like that. Yeah. Where it's like, oh, yeah. Well, and and letting the person tell their own story too.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Of like, oh, here's this guy, and then we're going to talk about him. Right. And not like, here's this guy, Joe, let's hear from you. Right. Yeah. The other example I was going to bring up is like that flip side of like the savant, right? Or, so like where you're like a doctor, like you, right. But like you think of again on like, you know, TV shows and movies and stuff. It's like, oh, the doctor with autism. And I'm like, correct that saying too. Like, I mean, yes, somebody's wanting, like, identifying themselves as like, I'm this doctor with autism, right? But most of us, right, like the identity first language, and like, I'm not a doctor with autism. I'm an autistic doctor, right? But if Sean Murphy wants to be fictional Sean Murphy wants to be called a doctor with autism, who am I to tell him, no, you should be calling, right? But right, like that as an example of, you know, and so like if I introduce myself as an autistic doctor, right, like do people go, oh, like Dr. Sean Murphy, yeah, I'm the good doctor, and do you like visualize all these things in your head? And I'm like, well, sometimes, but not like in this like textbooky thing like they do that. I mean, of course, that's like for dramatic effect, but yeah, I mean, like, yes, I will have when I have stuff that I'm thinking of, or like I'm working through like a diagnosis or something. Yeah, I'll occasionally have like the PowerPoint from my pathology class come up in my brain and be like, oh yes, this had this picture of this guy who looked like Anthony Hopkins, and then my professor told this joke about how he missed that question on his own board exam. And so like all that stuff that I remember from when I learned about the thing is all popping in my head, which has nothing to do with like the case I'm seeing in front of me, but all those like memories show up. And you know, that's how my autism and related thing, probably my ADHD symptoms and stuff show up. That's how my personality shows up in that. And yeah, I just and I feel like this month in particular, April, right, because it's like, you know, the
Autism Awareness Month.
I'm like, how do I even do that, right? Like,
I'm aware.
Yes, I'm aware.
Can we talk about acceptance instead? Like,
yeah.
Is that a thing we could talk about?
Yeah, and there was this other language too that they were shifting towards, even from awareness, and then awareness, acceptance, and then I think they had another A, and now I'm like totally forgetting what it was, but I was like, oh, that's even better, and like I'm like, but now I forgot it. So I'll probably think of it randomly later and be like, oh yeah, it was this. But
right.
You know, I'll swing back around. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So your friend in Washington, so they interviewed him and had like that inspirational story about pushing grocery carts, but like,
yeah. So it wasn't that they interviewed him. It was more of the Autism Society of Washington at the time was using this sort of like as the poster child of what success could look like.
Okay.
But the piece that they were missing was the other piece. So it's like they almost want to sugarcoat it and say like, look at how well this person is doing. But I'm like, that's not telling the whole story.
Yeah.
Like, because even like, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Yourself, myself included, even though that we're successful and functioning, if you will, there are days when sensory overload is legit and it gets in the way.
Yeah.
And so like, I want people to understand that there is a struggle associated with autism that is not really talked about. They talk about all of these positive things, but there's so many things on a daily basis that place limitations in our abilities to get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mind if I kind of go into what that can look like for myself?
Please.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So like on the outside, you know, people could look at me and go, oh, doctor. Right. Okay. So here's that check mark of like, oh, that means successful. Right. I own my own business. Right. I have kids. I have actually, I feel like I'm listing off all the things that in my first autism assessment got, uh, were the things that the psychologist listed off as reasons I couldn't possibly be autistic because
That's why I want to bring it up. That's perfect, because that's exactly why I want to bring it up. Mm-hmm.
Like, go ahead, you can't, if you're autistic, you can't have it, right? But yeah, so from the outside, and then of course, like, you know, my interactions, my direct interactions with my patients, where, you know, like, yes, I'm displaying my knowledge about the various medical things and whatnot, and like, you know, making these recommendations about whatever they're, you know, they're coming in to see me for support with, or like, oh, here's this lab thing, these lab tests that to work this up to figure out if you have any deficiencies here, or do you have this autoimmune condition or whatnot, and like, oh, here's all this display of intellectual knowledge, right? But then, you know, like I have a big population of patients that come to see me for mental health support, and a majority of those patients also are neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, OCD, right? Like all the various bundle of stuff that we encounter, or that we that our brains have going on. And I share my personal experiences. I don't do it in such a way that's like makes the visit about me, right? Because it's them, you know, like it's their visit, right? But I share it in such a way that, you know, when they're sharing this experience of like, oh, here's this dynamic that I had with my boss, or here's this dynamic that I have with my family member, or this encounter in traffic or at the grocery store or whatever, that was this conflict. And then you know, usually that story also involves like this activation of trauma and like trigger into this shame spiral of like, I screwed up in this situation. And then what I come back with is, you showed up as you. And just because the other person had a problem with that does not mean that who you are or how you responded was objectively wrong. It means they don't know how to deal with things that are different. And you know, and then the part where like I share about myself is like, you know, saying, here's how I struggle in social situations, or here, right? Like, that autistic tendency to be like, oh yes, your story reminds me of this thing. And right, when we're both neurodivergent, it's like, oh yes, this person, I mean, that's how I'm expressing the empathy. And, you know, and then I shift it back to tell me more about what was going on for you, not like, here, let's talk about me for 20 minutes, right? Like, I'm not, you know, because again, it's their visit, right? And so, but the reason I bring it in is, I mean, obviously like that neurotype tendency to do that when we're expressing empathy, but also to like reflect that it's okay to have those feelings that you have coming up around it, that it's okay, that you're not broken, that you're not wrong for your experience in those situations. And this person who you think is as the doctor, right, that you know, because I acknowledge that, like, yes, other people end up putting me in this separate class of like, oh, this is the measure of success, or this is, you know, like that hierarchical thing, which is like, that makes me slightly uncomfortable, because I'm like, oh no, don't think I'm better. I'm just another person. But right, so that I do like have this, like, this person that you're viewing as better does it too. And so like, I'm just like you. And so, yeah. And like, it seems to, right, based on like the direct verbal feedback that I get, and like the, you know, the continuing, like the feedback around and willingness to like share those intimate experiences, right? Those vulnerable experiences, that, you know, that tells me, and yeah, it's helpful when it's like literally telling me, thank you so much for sharing that, because nobody's taken the time, nobody's feel like nobody's met me where I'm at before. Nobody's like acknowledged what I've been through. Nobody's like given credit to what my experience is. And I always feel corrected, or I always feel like I shouldn't feel the way I feel. And I feel like I went on a total tangent with that, but
No, you're good,
it's sort of fun.
because that's the reality of it, though, right? Because like in my entire life, sorry, in my entire life since my diagnosis, the last 10 years now,
Mhm.
never once have I heard a doctor or a medical professional say what you just said. Never.
Yeah.
Never had a doctor acknowledge the struggles. Never had a doctor sort of acknowledge, with the exception of my therapist, who's
Mhm.
an autism specified therapist. He's the only one. Outside of that, nobody in the medical community, doctors, nurses, anything, has ever taken the time to sort of acknowledge that or even have that as part of the conversation,
Yeah.
which kind of sucks because a lot of the medical problems that I encounter are directly associated with autism.
Yep. Yeah.
And so if your doctor isn't willing to acknowledge the autism piece or the hypermobility piece,
Mhm.
you never get to how can we help you through that long-term thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that. And just like, I think, how do I want to say this? I, th- I feel like a lot of people are aware that is a problem, right? That problem happens where like our voices are unheard in a medical setting, right? Because it's another minority group, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, this isn't the I like hesitate to use the demographics of the preferred group.
Yeah,
But
but I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, and I know part of it is just how the system is set up too, right? And how the structure of medical visits are set up, and as determined by insurance protocols and systemic uh setup.
So,
I'm like trying to stick to the diplomacy of language.
systemic oppression is huge in the medical industry.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
really is.
And even if you have uh providers who care, if they're working in that system of oppression, there's only so much they can do, right? Like and then of course they burn out quicker, right? Like you see the
Oh
ones
yeah.
that who like had that compassion and had those ethics to begin with, and then they don't last long because the system, you know, uh and again,
Well, the
that's
system
another
kind
reason
of
I work for myself, right? Like I'm like, no, and that's what the reason why I went into the field that I went into instead of more mainstream medicine is like, you know, like yes, I have that same training of, you know, how the human body works and like, you know, microbiology and right, like all those things, because that's the same, you know, an infection isn't different in like, you know, it's the same microbe, right? Like
yeah.
that doesn't differ based on how you treat it. It's the same thing. It's the same bacteria, right? Like it's still this. It's just, you know, how are we approaching it? Do we give it this prescription antibiotic, or can we do other things along that, you know, because we may do a prescription antibiotic, but we may also do, in addition to that, these other immune supportive measures and anti-inflammatory measures that help deal with the fallout of that die-off from treating the infection, for example. And yeah, anyway, I feel like I always go tangential, but yeah,
It's all good.
I yeah, it feels a little bit ironic, or maybe I don't know if I'm using it Alanis Morissette style, and using ironic ironically, but where I, or at least with regard to like approach to people and approach to healthcare, like I'm less rigid in when it comes to that, right? Because I'm like, everybody is different, right? Like yes, we, you know, in general, most people have like the same anatomy, and right, sometimes people have the heart on the other side. But right, that's a rarer variation. But like I still will, like I will go into a case and I will approach a case like, okay, here's what this is looking like, and here's the various things that we usually use to treat this. But are there specifics about what symptoms this person is bringing up, or what their household is like, what their finances are like, what their long-term like support system, right? Like their ongoing support system is going to look like, what their job situation is, or, what kind of flexibility the job has around being able to take time off from work or something, all those other factors beyond just like the medical specifics to their case, right? So I'm not just going, oh, this person has this infection. It's like, how do I maintain their health in long term? Like, yes, I need to address this acute situation, but how do we support the overall health so that this doesn't turn into this recurring thing, or or something like that.
How do we intervene to stop the infection from happening in the first place, instead of like keep having to sort of cure it every time they come in?
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece to that too, that especially when you're taking like that holistic approach, and I appreciate that you said the part about like all of these other factors outside, because I don't think a lot of people understand how many people on the spectrum have coexisting conditions like PTSD, anxiety disorder, and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And when you encounter PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and I have all of those, it does have an impact on your metabolic system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's surprises me that that's not more of a conversation about just how much of an impact that has on a person's whole entire being.
Yeah. Yeah. That sent me my brain on a tangent about you've heard about the ACE scores.
Yes.
The adverse childhood experiences.
I have all but one.
Yeah, dang.
All but one.
See,
Yeah.
I have 6, which is still high. I think isn't it out of 10 or something? I can't remember what the top.
I think so.
Yeah, and a couple of them like are total like were no's on like technicalities. Like, oh yes, well, I didn't have an immediate family member that went to prison, but I had some that went to jail, right? So it wasn't as bad as prison. So like, so do I get to put a no on this? I mean, I did put a no on it, right? But I was like, should that have been a yes, or was it okay because it was only jail, right?
Right.
And like we're both laughing because we both have trauma.
That's a very neurodivergent way of looking at it.
But right, yeah. So that study, right, and that was even mainstream. It was Kaiser Permanente that did that, and that was over, I think it was like 20 years. I think was the whole, and right, that's mainstream. And so even there, right, they're saying, look at all these factors that are making a difference in somebody's long-term health and impacting those things. And like you said, like the effect on metabolic health specifically, right? And like that's what that study was showing, was like, look, these were having, and that's just trauma. Right. Right. And so it's like, oh yes, it was an increase of cardiovascular conditions, diabetes, right? Like, and so like all the usual, like, oh my gosh, well, you just need to lose weight, right? That's the answer or the instruction we usually get is lose weight. And that's the solution, not like, oh wait, you have trauma, let's support that. Like, and we, I mean, again, right. And I don't want this to come across, I'm concerned that this will come across of like, well, I approach it the right way, but like, I think beyond the, somebody has high blood sugar, well, they just need to go on metformin, right? Like it's like, or well, now it's like Wegovy or Manjaro, and I'm not getting paid by those companies. I'm sorry, I'm mentioning their names.
You're good. Uh-huh.
But right, where it's just like, oh, well, they just need this medication, and they need to exercise more and eat better, right? Like I don't like that given as general advice. It's not that it's inaccurate, it's just that it's incomplete and non-specific. And of course, like us neurodivergent people are like, yeah, thanks for the general advice. Eat better means what?
Mhm.
And how does that work with my sensory sensitivities around texture and taste and smells? Right? Like it's like, oh god, and again, like on my approach to with my patients is like I try to take in consideration those factors too. Like, yes, okay, we can make it, it is the recommendation is to make these adjustments to what what types of foods are your safe foods, and how, like, I'm also not going to be like, oh, you can never eat an ice cream sandwich again or whatever. I was just trying to pick a random thing that is usually thought of as not the healthiest thing. And that was one that came to mind. Can you guess which one I would pick? But right, like, I'm not going to be like, no, you can never have this, but like, maybe that's not like the go-to every single night, right? Like maybe that's every once in a while. And what can we do to maybe is it a texture, is it the flavors that has that are like comforting, and what is that attending to? Is that attending to like these cravings that are showing up? Is that attending to just like the like feeling comforted and safe with that taste from it? And so trying to find other ways to meet that need that may not be specifically the ice cream sandwich, but maybe we find something with similar taste that is more nutritionally supportive for what's going on for that person.
Yeah, and it's a little it's a little more unique on my end. So like say candy, for example, right? Like normal, like I don't hate to say normal people, but regular people, when they have a piece of candy, they can have like one piece and it's fine. With my sensory stuff, like I want to be able to have that flavor everywhere in my mouth. And so I want like 2 or 3 pieces so that I have an equal distribution. And that's a sensory thing. It's not like me wanting to have more candy than others. It's just, I want that equilibrium of flavors. And so I have to consume more than I would normally do. And comfort eating is a thing that I'm guilty of every night. Like I wish that wasn't the case, but doctors have always told me don't do it. But it's like, I don't know how to stop.
Right. But what's meeting that need as a replacement then? Right. Because
I don't know how to do that. Like I don't know what a replacement would be. Like, and frankly, I've never had that conversation before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, it may be very, very difficult to find that replacement. Right. And it, like and the issue that can come up around that is like that sense of failure, so to speak, around that of like, oh, I keep trying these things and I just keep going back to this, and I keep getting shamed by our culture, by my doctors, by but they don't actually offer sustainable solutions. They just tell me to stop. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, well, and that makes me think of behavioral interventions for autistic children, right? It's like, well, what's leading to the behavior in the first place, right? Like, and is the behavior problematic, right? Because sometimes the behavior is disruptive, right? But is it this threshold of problematic? And then, of course, there's that gray area of like, oh, it's interfering with other kids' ability to learn because it's distracting, that thing. And I'm like, I still feel like other ways to
I
look
also
at it.
I also want to intervene when I hear something like that, right? Because I have
Mhm.
like 3 questions I will always ask,
Mhm.
right? What happened 2 minutes before the behavior escalated to the point where it was a disruption? What kind of sensory environment is there when all of this took place?
Mhm.
And what exactly was the behavior disruption? Because if the behavior disruption was the child is running from the room and you don't acknowledge that there could be an odor in the room that's causing this child so much pain, literal physical pain from that odor,
Mhm.
and now you're blaming this child's behavior on the fact that there's something in this room that's causing them physical pain.
Mhm.
And that's as far as they go. Behavioral intervention, instead of like pause, let's take a brand look, as my cat's destroying my house. Uh, but and because like I'll never forget, there was an instance that I saw one time, very recently, where it was in a grocery store, and there was a mother of a child on the spectrum, and the child was too old to be in the grocery cart, right?
Mhm.
However, it was the only way this parent could get the child to go to the grocery store. And the manager started giving this mom a hard time about the child being in the grocery cart for her size. And ultimately, because the manager got involved and they're like, that behavior is not acceptable, she tried to shop with the child outside of the grocery cart.
Mhm.
But the child's behavior was such that she can't do it because she needed that extra comfort. And I don't understand like why people have to feel like they get involved and like
Mhm.
just let the mom have this child in the grocery cart.
Mhm.
There was nothing going on. The child was perfectly happy. They were getting their grocery done. There was nothing that would have caused this to be a disruption if
Right,
it
right.
wasn't
Like,
for
what was the
outside
manager
intervention.
worried about happening with the child in the grocery cart?
Right. And there nothing. And so
Yeah.
it's like when you hear stuff like that and what you're talking about, like with behavior intervention, I just wish people would just take a moment and think about the why before they just assign this is why it's got it. Like, have you asked? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the other piece that I don't understand and I appreciate about you, uh, is that you talk to the person with autism about what's going on. You know how many times in doctors' situations I've seen where the person is not talking to the autistic person, they're
Mhm.
talking to the parent or the caregiver,
Mhm.
not even acknowledging the person with autism is existing in the room. And I'm like, what message does that send to the person receiving care?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even with kids, I really try to be like, do you want uh I can talk to you, right? Like it depends on the age too, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
like
100%. Yeah.
because
Hmm.
like a 7-year-old isn't going to be able to necessarily like report their medical history the same as mom will or dad, um, or non-binary parent, um,
Yeah.
and right, and so like, but right, like the older kids, like for example, like a 10-year-old, for example, right, I will be like, uh, okay, so this is your appointment. Do what things do you have things that you want to talk to me about or ask me about, um and I'm going to have some questions too. Do you not want to talk to me at all and you'd rather me talk to your parents? But yeah, still like let the autonomy come from the center on the patient, the actual patient. But right, like I'm not going to ask a 2-month old all
Right.
the same
Hmm.
because they can't talk
Yeah.
yet.
And these instances that I'm talking about, these are like 19, 20-year-old adults.
Mm-hmm.
And it's their caregiver or their parent of an adult
Yeah.
who, and the doctor's still not talking to the adult who is on the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Well, and then it gets tricky too, like when somebody's nonverbal, but they have like their AAC, AAC. Am I getting that? AAC,
Yeah.
AC.
Hmm.
Like which letters did I say?
Hmm.
I will flip stuff. I'm like, sometimes I wonder, I never have been tested for dyslexia. Sometimes I wonder about that because I'm like, I feel like I flip stuff all the time. It makes
Oh
me
yeah,
good
I'll
at
say
that.
left when I mean right all the
Yeah.
time.
Or
All
like
the time.
somebody will be like an exercise class, like, okay, we're gonna go on our left side, and I'm like, totally go on the right, and I'm like, and they're like, that's okay, just do the other side when we flip to the other side. But
Guilty.
yeah. I actually did the exercise video this morning. Like I kept doing that, and I'm like, every time. But yeah, I just yeah, I feel like it happens a lot when you have nonverbal folks, because it's like and there ends up being this presumed level of incompetence, and I'm like, why can't we do the opposite where we presume competence, and then if there is impairment around communication, there aren't tools to help facilitate that, then we adjust to that. But yeah, I don't know why why the tendency is to do it the other way around.
I
I have
think
the
it's
issue where
expediency.
I'll forget, like I have to constantly, how do I want to phrase this? I I worry I worry a lot. I worry a lot in general, but I worry a lot about coming across as though I'm talking too too professionally, but too not like professional in the sense of like, oh, we're being
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
but yeah, like
Mhm.
using too technical of language, or using the what do they call it, the $1,000,000 words or $100 words or
Mhm.
whatever, right? Where or yeah, the how I when I was younger, I was often accused of being pedantic, right? Which I feel like even saying the word pedantic sounds pedantic, right? Can sound pedantic, but I'm so like I'm self-conscious about it, but like it's so hard not to just have like that technical language as a default, because it's like the most accurate way that I know how to describe something, and the most detailed way that I know how to describe something. And so again, right, like the pattern recognition and everything, like from like my autistic side of things, is to, well, if this is the most precise, why wouldn't I use that? But then, right, like it risks it going over people's heads. And so like usually my joke with patients is, sorry, you probably didn't know you're going to get a science lesson in this appointment. And then usually the feedback that I get is, no, it's great, I love that you're explaining it, and as long as you're okay with me asking for clarification, or what does this mean, then I'm okay with you doing it. And I'm like, oh, of course I'm okay, right? Like I love that, like I love that opportunity to teach. And I don't, right, like I think my tendency to default to that is coming from a place of presumed competence, right? Like I'm not necessarily expecting everybody to like know all the stuff that I learned in med school, right? If they didn't go to med school themselves, but I try to approach it as if they've already read stuff and researched stuff on their own. And so that I don't come across as if I'm dumbing down the language for them, because I feel like that could be more insulting than my tendency to do the other way. But right, there's a risk either way, right?
Right.
Because sometimes people will, if they don't understand something, they'll get it'll bring up their insecurities, and they might lash back out or something, or like but that's usually in like more personal setting than in my professional setting. But I do worry about that, of like and then like I remember uh somebody saying at one point, and I think it was like when I was trying to do like blog writing, and the feedback that I was getting, not like from like if I was posting them, but like when I was getting like marketing business coaching help. They're like, you need to word stuff at like a 6th grade educational level. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that means. Like, what do 6th graders read? And I couldn't even use my own kids as a point of reference because they also had like that intellectual or academic giftedness too. So it's like, I don't know what is 6th grade, right? Like, do I go, oh, what were my kids learning in 4th grade? Or like, then again, right? Like, I don't know what a standardized like 6th grade reading level. I don't know what that is. I still don't know, right? Like, I
Yeah.
even tried to research.
Don't feel bad. I was a journalist for almost a decade, and I still don't know.
Oh
So,
yeah,
but
yeah. That's what somebody
yeah.
recommended was like,
Mhm.
read a news article. And I'm like, oh God,
Mhm.
right?
It-
Excuse me.
the only way I know is that Microsoft now, when you do your readability score, they'll actually tell you what level of grade your writing is.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I used to use that a lot.
Yeah.
I do have a question though. Like,
Uh-huh.
when you were in school and kind of growing up, uh, did you always find like education piece like fairly easy?
The actual like,
Not the peer and social part,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Like, but
It's like
like
which
the
part?
actual like academic, because like,
Right, like the actual things we were learning
yeah,
in
yeah, because
general. Sorry, did you have another
I was
addition?
gonna say, because I struggled so much. Like, I didn't used to have a vocabulary, and one of the things
Mm,
that my ex-wife really did as a gift for me, she really pushed hard at expanding my ability to use different words,
mhm,
because like I had a really limited vocabulary because it was never a priority like in school.
yeah.
And I was just curious if because you were talking about pedantic in your language, like, was that something that was always available to you, or did you have to sort of learn that later in life like I did?
Yeah, no, it was. I'm trying to think of about what grade. I definitely got identified early, probably like 1st or 2nd grade early for math giftedness. Like I was even in tag. And then later, like with reading and language arts, or what else do they classify that category as now? Humanities. That was more difficult than math because it had more abstract concepts, right? With like, and like learning like passive voice to things, or like, right, it's all the, like the social stuff that we struggle with, right? And so that part of that subject area, literature, of like, what is the author's intention, or what was this character thinking? And it's like, well, they said this, and then it's like, yeah, but look at what is describing how they're, what facial expressions they're making. And I was like, what, huh? But that doesn't match what they said, right? And I'm like, now, right, like since my autism diagnosis, I'm like, oh, look, that weird how that is phrased similarly to the diagnostic language here. Right, but like, and I think, but really like how learning that, and I'm the person that is not afraid to ask questions. I
Yeah.
will like seek clarification, and I mean, I'm sure it was harder earlier on, and depending on the person, but like in the school setting, I wasn't afraid to ask questions. And even though sometimes depending on the teacher, like sometimes I was met with, well, you're smart, you can figure it out, right? And I'm like, well, I'm good at math, but this English thing is a little bit confusing because this said this, but there's this that's making it sound like it doesn't match. So how am I supposed to? And so like, so I'd learn those things because some teachers would give that feedback of, yeah, when it looks like this, when this type of phrasing is used, that's what indicates that this incongruity um, makes it mean this other thing, not what they're literally saying. And so that I feel like lended to me being able to mask and me being able to interpret those social aspects when interacting with people and get by and go under the radar for so long, because I did develop those skills, but I had to develop them as an academic exercise, not just a social interaction and innate development of social skills. It was like literally studying those aspects. And then I went on to study psychology in undergrad. Right. And so like, I'm like, how do humans think? There is variation in how humans think and how they function and how they behave. And I basically memorized different ways of like that people would interact. And then I'd go, okay, does this fit this? Right. And so then it turned into this pattern recognition thing. And so it allowed me to get by and to function, but it was exhausting. Oh my, and it's still exhausting, but it's like, at this point it's more, because I've had decades of practice of it. And so it's still tiring because it's still this purposeful effort to do it. It's not automatic. Right. And so I know that was slightly tangential, but yeah, with academic skills, I think also I developed a special interest in foreign language too. Like later,
Okay.
like mid high school,
Mhm.
like upper, or what do you call it? Yeah, upper class, as an upperclassman. And so I think also learning a foreign language helped with that as well. Or I learned two while I was in school.
Yeah.
Neither of which were Spanish, which is kind of funny because but I took German and then I took French, which if I was ever going to advise somebody who wanted to take both of those, I'd tell them to do it in the other opposite order, do French first and then German, because I feel like the order I did it made it harder to learn French, because I wanted to pronounce everything in the French word, and like you really only actually say out loud like half of the word.
Oh, interesting.
Like what is it? Can, like to be able to,
Mhm.
in I think it's like obviously I don't speak it very often anymore, but I think it's the plural, like we can,
Mhm.
or maybe it's like
Können wir.
can, where it's the like yeah, maybe it's they can, where it was like ils peuvent, and it was spelled Peuvent.
Okay.
And but you just say it up to the V, right? And I was like, what? How do you know I know the word if I'm not pronouncing the whole thing? And in German, you're like saying every single
letter.
stinking letter. Yeah. But German's fun to do. Did I tell you what my favorite German word was? Die Geschirrspülmaschine.
The gumball machine?
Dishwasher.
Dishwasher.
Yeah,
See, I haven't spoken
Geschirr,
German in 20
right? Yeah.
years.
I'm like, I think the Geschirr part is the dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I chuckled when you were talking about school and like literature and books, because I just made a connection now that I haven't made my entire life. I just now realized how damaging a book was to all of my relationships with other men on this planet. They made me read Lord of the Flies. And I internalized that's what's going to happen if you develop strong relationships with
Did you
other
say Lord of the
dudes.
Flies? It cut out on
Yeah.
my end. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
God.
Lord
Yeah,
of
I
the
remember reading
Flies.
that. Yeah. Holy cow.
Like, first of all, we shouldn't have been reading that at like 10 years old.
Right. I always, like a lot of those, I was like, why was this done at this grade? Woo.
And second,
Yeah.
I just occurred to me like, oh, no wonder. Like,
Wasn't To Kill a Mockingbird early on too?
yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Like, that's dark, deep, like dark.
Yeah.
Like, why are we reading this as children? Like, but anyway, I digress. And the reason I only bring it up is because like I just realized like how much of a literal translation I took with fiction, and I used that to develop my knowledge of the world as a child because I didn't have any other access. and how warped my worldview was until later in life, because, I love my dad, but he left me to my own devices for the last 10 years of high school. And so I didn't have that extra social support to teach me those social skills, which kind of was a disservice in a way. Because even now, like, I'm really good at making friends and having that initial sort of conversation. Once I've established that, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. I'm convinced that pretty much all of my friends are also neurodivergent. And several have gone on to get diagnoses too. So I was like, that makes sense, right? I mean, but a lot of friends, like I was in band, and right. So like, the arts and, those nerdier activities kind of attract our group too, right? Because it's like that activity is kind of a little bit more outcast, and so the outcasts fit in better there, right? And yeah, I had another thought about like the literature English stuff, that the memory that had come up around that, and it was like had to do with like uh specifically it was like the state testing that we had to do, or whatever standardized testing that we had to do. And I used to think, like earlier on, again, like I think it was like third grade, I know that the the adjustment that I had to make the things happened before the end of elementary school. So it was earlier elementary that on that portion that did like the more English skills, and then you had to like read the essay and then answer questions to that, and you had to only like the limited amount of time to get through the whole thing, right? And I'd never finish that because I would literally read the whole dang essay, every single thing, for each of the things. And so like because I was so meticulously like reading that and then answering the questions, I'd run out of time. And then what ended up happening, and so like I'd have like disproportionate score outcomes for that, from like, like, oh, here's your math is in like 99th percentile or whatever. And then like I still did okay, right? But it was like, getting almost 100% on some things and then getting like an 80 on something else. And it was like, why is this so skewed? And then yeah, I had a teacher at some point was like, are you it looks like these scores are impacted because you're not finishing. Are you reading the whole thing each time? And I'm like, yes. Like that's what the instructions say to do, is read the passage, then answer the questions, or however it was phrased, right? And they're like, here's a suggestion. They're like, read the questions first, then go back to the paragraph and look for what's discussed in the questions in the passage. And I'm like, but isn't that cheating? Like I was so worried, like, oh, but I'm not doing all the work because it says read the passage. And they're like, you're just supposed to answer the question. I'm like, but, and they're like, no, just do it this way. And I was like, okay, because you're giving me permission as the teacher, right? Like, but I was like, so like worried that I was like going to get in trouble for not reading the thing because that's what it says on the instruction. And then after that, yeah, like all those scores started like matching up with all the rest. And it was like, yeah, see, because when I actually can finish, it's not that I didn't know the stuff. It was that I just didn't get through it. I was also that kid that would like, finish a thing and then not flip the thing a page over and look on the back and like totally turn it in before I was done because I didn't look on the other side of that, or like I'd miss a question because the formatting was off and so it looked like it was part of another question or something like that, where yeah, like I ended up not putting an answer, or yeah. And I was like, I hated those things. And it's funny because some of the ADHD assessment tools have like almost verbatim phrasing like that, of like, did you leave the back page of a test on or did you often leave the back page of a test unanswered. I was like, hey, were you watching in my classroom? Right? Like, I feel called out here, but also validated.
And I didn't get that until I was in college. Like, uh, it wasn't until college that I also thought you had to read absolutely everything. And I remember my first college course I failed because I didn't have enough time to read all of the books. And then when I went back to college the second time, that's when somebody taught me how to study. And like they taught me the coolest trick ever. Like if you have a massive book that you need to read, read the first chapter, or read the first paragraph of every chapter, read the last paragraph of every chapter, and skim the rest for useful information. But I was reading every single book. And like when you get a college class and they're like 10 books at 1,000 pages, like how am I supposed to read 10 books at 1,000 pages in 2 weeks and work a full-time job? And it wasn't until somebody told me, well, you don't have to read the whole book, that I was like,
you're like, then why did they say this?
Tell me this 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Man, I hated those.
The autism experience. Ugh.
I was just thinking about what you're saying about vocabulary earlier, and I think, right, like I talked a little bit about like the foreign language special interest, but like it felt like, learning vocabulary felt like a game. And I think that's why I was able to do it, because it was like, ooh, and this, and and I would play games like, like the crossword puzzles, or like I love, and still like these are like the types of games I prefer, where you like have to come up with like a synonym to something or an antonym to something, and or like ways to describe the word you're trying to get the person to guess, right? Like in like catchphrase or taboo games. I like those. That's
interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because that's kind of what sorry,
what's it?
Sneeze. That's how my wife got me to learn it, is we made it into a game. Where it was like every week I would try to use like 6 or 7 words that I didn't know, and I would try and catch her, because she was like the queen of vocabulary. And so I would try to use words that I think was the right way, and she would like push back, like, no, I think you're trying to say this word, or you're trying to use, and that was so helpful. And now people like think I'm this brainiac because I use certain words. Like, I'm not a brainiac. I just really worked on vocabulary for a minute.
Yeah. I remember being upset whenever we learned. I'm trying to remember what grade it was, but whatever grade you learn how to spell the word vacuum. And I remember being so upset that vacuum was spelled the way it is.
Yep.
I'm like, no. Because when I was first guessing it, right? Because you do like the pre-test or whatever of like, see what you can get on your own. Like, why would you know the spelling of something, right? Like, you can sound stuff out based on phonics. You can figure stuff out based on how other words, that's, like the homophones, right, and things like that. But like vacuum, like my guess for vacuum was using a what is it, MN, right? Like, like column, right? So that was my guess for vacuum, and then they were like, you M, and I was like, no. I was so mad.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was 3rd or 4th grade, I won the spelling bee. And which to this day I still think, I don't understand how I did it, but somehow I managed to do it. And then I got to like the next phase, and my whole family was there, and then the first word was friend, and I got the INE backwards. First round. I was so disappointed in myself.
That's like their it's their umbrella.
First person, first word, easiest word, and
Well, and like
And
I can never remember that I before E rhyme.
except after C.
Yeah, but isn't there another
There's
part to
so
it?
many exclusions.
Yeah, because I remember that part, the I before E except after C, and then there's like
Except for.
Yeah,
And I don't remember.
there was like wait. I think was
And
what
now
it
if it,
was.
and
What was
now if
that?
it wasn't for Microsoft Word, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
My spelling is atrocious these days. But
That's
I do want to get back to the
yeah.
social
Yeah.
aspect things, right?
Hmm.
Because like as I was saying, like even today, like there's so many social things that nobody like talks about, right? Like relationships, for example, right? I wish there was an avenue or an open place where you could learn more about how to have uh, a healthy relationship, because I'm not even sure I know what that means, right? I don't think I've ever been in a healthy relationship. And it's one of those things where like I wish they would talk about that stuff in school. I don't know if they do now or not. Um, but I always thought it was odd that they didn't teach you the social things that you should be, that you just sort of left to figure it out amongst other kids. And that was kind of mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a rude, undiplomatic thought about our culture and how it doesn't really uh have that standard, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like in our culture the people that tend to get rewarded and promoted and favored don't have healthy relational skills, right? They like um would get sorted into Slytherin, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel bad even referencing that author's materials, since it turns out she's such a anti trans
Well,
what do
and
they
I
call it,
don't think,
turf. um
yeah.
yeah. But
I,
yeah, right, Slytherin of like that ambition, right? Because I was like, what's wrong with ambition? I feel like I'm ambitious. Like I like push for like, you know continued growth in myself, and I keep trying to achieve, right? Like I'm not uh I wouldn't say I'm never satisfied with where I'm at, but I would say like I still like I'm always striving for more. I'm always wanting to go like the next step. But like when I think of like how Slytherin gets described in general, is no matter the cost, right? Ambition
yeah.
at no matter the cost, and the cost to others around you. And right, and I feel like that, circling back to like our culture, I feel like our culture tends to promote that of like, the only way to really truly be successful, and how our capitalistic culture is set up, and not that we're the only ones, is to you at times having to take advantage of others, right? And I do not, that makes me so uncomfortable, right? Because I'm
But
like,
it's true.
if I have to sacrifice somebody else, then I'm not going to do that, right? Like I'm like, okay, then I guess my growth is limited because I'm not willing to do that to somebody else,
And I have
like
a modern case in point, right?
yeah.
So energy drinks had this problem along the way.
Hmm.
The energy drink industry said, we need to figure out a way to get rid of the jitters, to get rid of the come down once you get off caffeine. I know. We'll put in a cyanide derivative chemical called bobolin or whatever it is.
Yeah, so
And
it's the cyanide connected to the B12
yes,
cyanocobalamin. Yeah. Yeah.
and we're supposed to trust these companies who have already poisoned us, that they have the safe process of extracting the cyanide completely from this chemical.
Mm-hmm.
And then you read the list of side effects, and one of the side effects is cyanide poisoning. So how can a chemical that has no cyanide have a side effect of cyanide poisoning?
Mm-hmm.
And then this is what you put in the energy drinks. And my question is to like, well, why did you do that? Right? Because I would think if I owned a company like that, not patient safety, but customer safety would be a part of
I
the
do that all the
conversation,
time.
right? Uh, and so it's like, I don't understand like how you can take a chance with a process that uses cyanide to make things easier and more profitable for you. Like, why is that even a thing? But it's a thing, and it happens everywhere. And so it's like at some point, and I do believe it's when they started shifting towards that shareholder model, when it's so more important for profit and shareholders than even your own safety of your customers. Because I don't know if you've noticed this or not with my extreme pattern recognition. When's the last time you heard any company talk about safety outside of the car industry, right? Cars are safe. Outside of
Unless
that,
they're trying to point out their competitors' lack of safety or compare them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But nobody's like, hey, our cereal is free from all of these chemicals. You should eat our cereal. They don't do that.
I was just thinking about the pharmaceutical commercials. And it's like, oh, here's all the stuff it helps with. And then it's like, doing like the micro machines guy quick run through all the side effects. Yeah. I don't know. It always makes me think of the micro machines guy from like, was that the 90s? That like,
yeah. Because that's exactly kind of what it is.
Yeah.
You know? And I hope we can get to a point where we just don't advertise pharmaceuticals on TV anymore.
Yeah. I always thought that was weird. Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, why would you advertise them if like they're not directly available to somebody, right? Like, why would I'm like, that should be on like doctor TV or something, right?
Right. Because there's so many factors, right? Like you should not be taking a medication or even a substance, right? So let's say alcohol, right? Alcohol is legal, right? If you are on certain medications, if you are on certain paths or whatever from your doctor, you should not be drinking alcohol. And the reason I bring this up is because the doctors, when they prescribe medications, are taking all of these other factors into account before they do a medication. And so you as a consumer, like, oh, I want to be on this medication for diabetes. You don't know if that's the good one for you or not, because no two people are the same. And to take that out of the doctor's hands and put that in the hands of consumers is actually kind of harmful.
So that's a huge issue that comes up with supplements, right?
Yeah.
So like that's actually I feel like that's one of like the banes of my existence is that, right? Like I'm properly trained regarding those ingredients, right? Or majority of it, right? Like and herbs specifically too, right? And so like yeah, but they're like, again, directly marketed to consumers and they're available over the counter and they're not FDA regulated and everybody wants to all retailers want to dip their foot in, or whatever that phrasing is, that they want a piece of that pie, right? That profit pie. And yeah, I was just like, oh, and especially like there's those what is it called? Multi-level marketing, right? Like the pyramid schemes, or what's the other diplomatic way? Direct sales, right?
Yeah.
So those things. Clearly, I revealed my opinion about that setup, and and so then their marketing is like, oh, you can decrease your hot flashes. Oh, get rid of your brain fog. The one that works on most people to get them to buy products, lose weight, right? Like, I'm just like, oh God, and especially if they're, everybody's like, you're fat, lose weight. You have all the problems you have in life because you're fat. Like, and yeah. Anyway,
And it's a weird cycle.
Yeah.
It's a weird cycle.
Right. And so then you have people, right, whose self-conscious has been these retailers being opportunistic, preying, PREY, right, on and on people's self-conscious. And then of course, like, yeah, I like have a whole soapbox about like the whole vicious cycle of, oh, buy this meal at Sonic or buy this meal at McDonald's. And I feel like I'm doing all this name dropping and like and I'm not even wanting to drop these names, right? I'm like, here's these places I don't really like. I'm not hopefully I'm not defaming anybody, right? Because like I don't think I'm saying any inaccurate information. And and people, right? Like people have autonomy, and like if somebody wants to eat at McDonald's, they can eat at McDonald's.
Hey, McDonald's French fries are always going to be the best in my book.
I remember, like, I used to really love the quarter pounder with cheese back in the day. My kids, or the kids in my household now, my younger kids, my older son, who's in 8th grade, was talking to a classmate, and the classmate was talking about McDonald's, and my son was like, I think I've had McDonald's twice in my entire life. And I was like, sorry, not
Jealous.
sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, sorry, not
He's
sorry.
Like, I know. He's like, like,
and
I like
if anybody questions whether or not McDonald's is good or not, take a McDonald's cheeseburger and leave it on the counter for a week. And tell me how much mold grows on that hamburger.
0.
Right. So what does that say?
I have a McDonald's chicken nugget story very similar to that, which was when my older kids were little. So they're in their mid-20s now. And we they'd gotten the, what is it, Happy Meal, whatever.
Yeah.
The chicken nuggets. It had like one of them had fallen under the seat or in between the seat or whatever. And then years later, we're like, I think it was when we went to trade the car in and like, we're trying to get it cleaned out or whatever. And like, we found it and it looked
the same,
exactly the same. And then we're like, but it feels so light, right? We're like, this feels like, and so like, we're like, oh, do we risk trying to open it up? And like, okay. And then it was like essentially like mummified, right? It was soup. It was like desiccated. It was all dehydrated. So that was, but have you seen, what was it? It was one of the angry chef guys.
No.
One of the British angry chef.
Gordon Ramsay?
I don't think it was him. What was the other one?
I don't know the other one. Eric Zimmerman, maybe? I don't know.
Anyway, who like had this group of kids in his kitchen, right? And he was showing them how chicken nuggets were made, like fast food chicken nuggets were made, right? Like the like oozy ground up chicken, and they're all like, ew, and so then they made them, they cooked them, and then he's like, so who wants one, after knowing what it looks like? And then they were all like, yeah. And he's like, oh no, I'm trying to teach them what good cuisine is, but they still want this chicken nugget. It was, I don't know, I thought it was really hilarious, but that was the
tastes so good.
I know. Well, and
whatever like, chemicals they put in there make it taste good and makes your body crave it.
Well, and it makes me wonder, right? Like what additives, like, yeah. Well, and I'm
sure they won't tell you.
I'm sure it's on purpose. Yeah. Well, it's proprietary patented knowledge. We must protect that. That's one of the most important things to protect. Sorry. Like this tangent was brought to you by
but I gotta say, right? Like if you want McDonald's, have McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
We should not be in a position where we're not telling people what they can and can't do. What I would like to see though is a real list of ingredients. Tell us everything that's in our food.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. Right. And that's why I get annoyed and frustrated about those proprietary blends. And kind of
naturally essenced with what? What are you naturally essencing this with?
Natural flavors.
I want to know.
Great.
Yeah. But they won't tell you. Right.
Yeah. I'm like, why are you
not passion fruit?
But yeah, like, and that's why I get nervous around those like things being available over the counter. And, like you were saying, of like where doctors are trained to take into consideration what else the person's taking, what medical conditions they have, and right, and like assess whether it's contraindicated or not. And with supplements, right, especially like if they contain herbs, the mainstream docs don't necessarily have that background. So they
Right.
blanket, their blanket statement is don't take it, it's not safe, right? And then that's where I end up with people and being like, so can I actually not take this? And I'm like, well, so I get, right, because they don't have the training, and so they're erring on the side of safety of like saying don't risk it. And then I'll say, so this ingredient does this, right? Like I will literally go through like the list of ingredients on there. I will usually make rude commentary about proprietary blends and say, so this says that it has a list of these. What frustrates me is that I don't know the amounts. And so I can't attest to, so like, for example, like a proprietary blend might contain 5-HTP in it, which acts on the serotonin pathway. And so if somebody's on Zoloft or one of those SSRIs, that might be a contraindication because they're both, right, that might risk sending somebody into serotonin syndrome, which is a medical emergency, right? And so I sure the heck don't want somebody self-prescribing some 5-HTP. And I'm even hesitant to prescribe the ones that don't tell me the amount. And, so I do get a little frustrated about that. I tend to err on, like, I will do it because I'll go, okay, if it is part of a proprietary blend, it probably doesn't have the amount that is the usual therapeutic amount when they do disclose, because there's plenty of ones where 5-HTP is a separate ingredient that they're listing separately from their proprietary blend, and it's like 5-HTP 100 milligrams or 50 milligrams, right? And so I make the assumption, right? So this is on me, right? This is a risk that I end up taking, is that I go, okay, I'm going to assume that they're not putting any more than what the therapeutic amount would be when they do disclose. I don't think they're going to use more than that amount. And so based on that, I'm going to say they're using a maximum of 100 milligrams in this proprietary blend. They're very likely using less. And so, and you're on 50 milligrams of Zoloft as an example, right? And
Right.
so, and you're not reporting a history of being hypersensitive to the Zoloft and needing a lower amount, and part of why you're coming to me and asking about supplement-based support is because you don't want to increase the amount of Zoloft. And so my approach in that case, with those parameters, is okay, like this is not going to be any riskier than increasing that Zoloft dose. And it's going to be supportive in other ways because of these other ingredients that are in it for your mental health beyond what the Zoloft would be providing. And not to say that Zoloft doesn't work, right? Like it's been life-saving for people. But right, like what is this specific patient's requests and needs and picture here, and what are we trying to support, and what are the other ingredients in this supplement supporting in addition to the mental health? Maybe there's things in there that like are hormone supportive or thyroid supportive or things like that. And so that might be why I'm recommending that versus like them increasing their Zoloft dose, which would only be addressing that selective serotonin reuptake inhibition there. And so like, that's kind of like part like that
Yeah.
clinical thought process that goes into that there for me.
And then what about multivitamins? Should people be taking them, do you think?
Well, I'm never going to do a blanket statement of everybody should be taking this set of things, right? Like,
Which I appreciate about you.
Right? Because
Mhm.
I don't know, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't know their history, everybody's history, right? And so, like, things like multivitamins, things like probiotics, where those are like pretty common things that like do get blanket recommendations around, right? But those might exacerbate things for some people, and depending on, I mean, there's a lot of variation again because there's not that FDA regulation around it.
Yeah.
um Not that FDA at this point would necessarily be as I would necessarily have as much confidence about.
Yeah, they've
Too outspoken,
kind
sorry.
of they've
um
kind of let us down a few times in the last few years. Yeah.
yes, clearly I have
Mhm.
certain political preferences based on
Yeah. Mhm.
although I feel like Medicare for all would kind of
Mhm.
probably crash and burn because um, I don't think we're I don't think
It
we have
depends.
I don't think we have the infrastructure set up to execute it properly. Because look at the VA.
Yes, but at the same time, right? If it weren't for the VA, I wouldn't be here today,
Right, right, yeah.
right? And one of the wild ideas that I had the other day
Mm.
is and I question is like, why are hospitals private entities?
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah. Oh, and I'm
Like,
not
why
saying
couldn't
Medicare for all would
just
look worse than the private
oh,
setup.
100%,
I'm
right?
just saying, like,
And I'm
it's a
just
little.
saying, like, as an alternative, right? We can keep our insurance, we can keep all this stuff. I just like because like the everything I hear is like, well, hospitals aren't staffed enough and all this, like because of this. So why don't we
Yeah,
focus on funding life-saving efforts and saying that nobody should have to suffer $150,000 hospital
yeah,
bill
no,
because
no,
they got sick? Like,
yeah,
why can't we just take care of that piece
yeah.
and that piece alone?
If I could trust the people running it,
Yeah.
that yeah, like that's yeah, no, I want universal health care. Yeah.
But if they
I
do it
just
incorrectly, it could be
I'm just like,
disastrous.
ooh, this government, especially right now,
Mhm.
but that this
Oh,
particular
yeah.
administration would
And
do
there's
that.
a huge difference between like the VA today and the VA of like 15, 20 years ago, right?
Hmm,
Like
hmm,
the VA 15, 20 years ago that screwed up my hernia operation
man, yeah,
and caused me like years and years of pain and discomfort is different than the VA today.
yeah, yeah.
It's different.
I was
Um,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
no,
I was gonna go on another tangent.
I was just going to say, like, there are still a lot of room for improvement, right? The
Hmm.
VA is no longer
Yeah,
perfect.
I mean,
However, at the
there
same
always
time,
is, right? Like I'm sure
right.
there's even improvement in Finland, or room
Mhm.
for improvement in Finland, that is, has a really good
Mhm.
reputation around their public
And
service.
people shouldn't go bankrupt if they get sick.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's ridiculous. Yeah.
So
I
where
was
were you going to head? Please.
Oh, I mean, it was still related. So, it was actually, I'm trying to remember where the article was, but I was reading about IHS, so Indian Health Services, which,
Yeah.
very similar. And, because, and how do I want to phrase this? Because they've been shortchanged from the beginning. I don't know. Like they've been, and I feel like it also ties into the community that's being served that is used to being screwed over, right? And so the IHS has gotten really scrappy and really resourceful with the crap funding they right, like and so stretched their budget really, and have done a really effective job, which I feel like is a double-edged sword, because it's like, because then it gives the impression that, oh, well, they don't need more money, right? And it's just like, oh my gosh, just because we like we've like scrimped and saved and like did all this and did it effectively and took care of our people because we prioritize the right things, does not mean that we should continue to be screwed over. But like when it's profit over people, again, right? Like things are done like that. But yeah, I'm trying to backtrack.
And I would
Sorry, go ahead.
and I would love to see that script flipped a little bit, right? Instead of us saying, look how amazing this is because they're able to do what they can do with the limited resources they have. Let's flip that and say, imagine how much more they could get done if we funded them properly. And why aren't we funding them properly? Why? Because if the answer is it's cost too much or whatever, it's like, so how much are you actually putting on the value of human life?
Right.
Because if you're talking about decency and human beings and their ability to live and thrive, they need to have at a core level your medical needs and dental needs met.
Yeah.
And if that's not the number one priority, the health and safety of our freaking populace, but they say, oh yeah, health and safety is the number one priority of this country, which is why we're going to invest in all these bombs. Like, how about you buy half as many bombs and you pay for twice as many hospitals?
Yeah. What was I had a similar, and this was actually like back in high school. I was like, this thing does not make sense to me. A similar thought about abortion clinic protesters, right? I'm like, and the ones that would bomb abortion clinics, right? And I'm like, okay, so they're wanting to preserve the sanctity of life, but then they're bombing this clinic. And so not only is the unborn baby being killed, but all this collateral damage is happening too. And I'm like, how is, like, right? Like, I'm like, I thought life was important to you, but like, you know, and again, right? Like that's the cognitive dissonance that they choose to have of like, because they consider that certain set of people evil, right? Like, and the baby was going to die anyway, right? I think it was the logic.
I don't understand that logic.
Yeah, and so like I was always like, that doesn't like, but yeah, I mean, right, compute. Like, yeah, like that's nobody else's decision. Like I'm like, I get that moral perspective, and you can't impose your will on somebody else, like, you know, like right, but you know, of course, like arguments against that are like, well, then why do we arrest people for murder? And it's like, because people who are alive and conscious have the autonomy to make decisions about their own lives, right? And that's taking away that autonomy. And then of course it goes back to, well, what about the baby's autonomy? And it's like, at the point that they're getting that done, it's not, they're not able to have that autonomy because they don't have that viability. And right, but you can't use like the science and like all that, because it's an emotional argument.
Well, and from a purely religious perspective too, right? The one thing I don't understand in that situation is that you're basically negating your own religion when you make that choice, because now you're taking judgment out of God's hands and you're putting judgment in your own hands and you're acting like God. So if you believe in God and believe in God's judgment, let God judge. Who are you to judge? You're not God. You're just a human being who's fallible, who sins and all this other stuff too, right? So if you're religious, leave the judgment to your religion. There's no need for you to judge another human being based on their behaviors or actions or whatever. So it's not up to you.
Yeah.
And when you take that realm, it bothers me.
Well, and stop voting against all the other programs that are leading that mother to feel like she can't support that child in the first place, too, right? Because that's the other thing that's been cited as a big component in those, the decision, how do I want to say this, right? Because they're like, oh, the elective abortions that, you know, and it's like a lot of what gets cited in that is like that the person, those folks don't feel like they could support a baby, right? And
And that's the reality of this country sometimes. Like, do you really want to have a child and bring that child into poverty?
mm-hmm.
If you're not ready and you can't, like, you're not going to be able to support that child or you or your family, like, I get it.
Yeah. And then that same group that's like, oh, the pro-life, again, not all the folks.
Not all. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm
It's
picking the
no, but you're absolutely
the
right.
topic.
It's the people with the dead baby posters and all of that. That's just over the top.
It's just again, right? Like I'm trying to. The problem is that I'm like viewing through the lens of like logic and what makes sense, and it's not based on that. It's based on that emotional and religiously informed. But yeah, that is not like, it doesn't have that robust integration of that critical thinking, right? Which is not like, I'm not trying to call those folks stupid. It's just that they're not considering all the aspects that are involved in that, because it's a lot more complex than they're making it out to be. And there's a lot of things that like they're not even like thinking about as part of that. And that's why I would wish they would just leave it to, right? Because it's the decision is being made in conjunction with the medical advice around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I don't know. Yeah. I just hate when medical autonomy is taken away.
Yeah, it should very well be my body, my choice.
Right.
My body, my choice. I
Right.
should be able to be with whomever I want to be. I should be able to do whatever I want to do. I should be able to seek whatever medical treatment or to refuse whatever medical treatment. It should be up to you as a personal human being to have the autonomy to choose what is best for your own life. And I don't think the government or anyone else has any business interfering with what you want to do, as long as you're not hurting somebody else.
Right. But that's how they're viewing it, right? Oh, they're hurting the baby, right? Like that. I think that, I mean, that's what they're saying, right? Like, I don't know. At this point right now, at least in the conversation, I'm like, maybe they read Lord of the Flies too.
Right.
Like, oh, we need to take care of the outcast, and they're going against our rules. This is our rules. Yeah, that book freaked me out too.
I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. That one left a mark.
Yeah.
But, and then, so we've been at this already for an hour and a half.
An hour and a half.
And
like always.
I don't mind at all.
I don't mind either.
There's one topic I just wanted to make sure that we got a touch on before we end our conversation today. And that's the conversation of support groups. Here's why I want to have this conversation. So if you are autistic, and I will say this to the day I die, and you're not a part of a support group, you are doing yourself a disservice. Here's why. It's so hard for us to find other people who are neurodivergent if we are stuck in situations where we're never around people who are neurodivergent. Mm-hmm. And just that little bit of being in a group with 20 or 30 people who have a shared experience in life saved my life. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I hear all the time from people is, I don't understand why I am a part of a support group or why I should join. And as a facilitator, I'm always curious, like, why join a support group? Like, I know why I do it, and I facilitate and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. If you don't mind, I would like to know, like, why are you a part of a support group, and what has it meant to you? Because I want other people to know.
I think for me, so I'm a part of. I think yours is the one I probably attend most regularly, and even then, sometimes the way my schedule is, it ends up, having a conflict. Like, I don't think I made it this last week, but so I'm in yours. I'm in the one that meets every other Friday for the autistic professionals. I occasionally attend the I'm trying to remember the title of it. So Ray leads two
Mhm.
groups.
Yeah.
So there's one on Monday, and intersectional identities, right? So like BIPOC, LGBTQ, um, AFAB, right? AFAB, signed
Mhm.
female at birth. Yeah, right. And so like the even more marginalized identity aspects, right? So like the topics and that one tend to like focus on that aspect where it intersects with being autistic, right? Like we're autistic and we're dealing with that other component of being marginalized as well. Um, and then Ray has another, the one on Tuesday is a regular support group, regular
Right.
open
Uh-huh.
open-ended,
Uh-huh.
like your Thursday one. So what is that I'm up to? That's three,
Yeah.
4. I occasionally go to the female identifying / non-binary group. That's every other Sunday. That's 5. So I think that's all the ASO ones I go to. That's 5 ASO ones. I also attend 2 local ones to me, and through a neurodivergent space in for adults in Bend, and they have Zoom meeting too. So technically, people outside the area could theoretically attend. And that so we have a uh, neurodivergent group that started out with ADHD, late diagnosed ADHDers, that meets every other Tuesday. So that's 6.
Yep. Mhm.
I do a once a month. This is also on a Tuesday. That's later. Sometimes those two end up on the same day. So I'm like in support groups for like 2.5 hours or something. That other one is through ASO in the LA area. And that actually is facilitated by her name is Jamie Roberts, and she's a licensed marital and family therapist, who has she was interviewed on Divergent Conversations with Patrick Casal and Dr. Megan Anna Neff. I think it was on that. It was either on that or Patrick's podcast for therapists, all things private practice. Um, and anyway, so she's ADHD as well. And so I was like kind of fangirling, and like she had posted that she was like, she took over as facilitator of that group. And I was like, somebody else asked, hey, if we're out of state or out of the area, can we attend too? And she was like, of course. And I was like, okay, I live in Oregon. Can I come?
I love it. Mhm.
And so that's 7. Oh, I didn't say the second one, the second local one. The second local one I go to is on Wednesday mornings, and that one's for parents of neurodivergent kids. And so the parents aren't necessarily neurodivergent themselves, though many of us are. Or because the kids got diagnosed, the parents were like, wait, what? Right? And
Right.
then them getting diagnosed. Um, and so that is at least 8. I'm trying to think if I went to any others. But yeah, that's plenty, right? Like that's a lot. Not every, the
And what
LA
keeps you
one was
going back?
what uh it's there's similarity. So I would say the similarities in all of them are that sense of community from people who understand and relate to what you've gone through, right? Where you may not have the exact same story, but there are very similar things that in our encounters and relationships with neurotypicals they just don't get it, right? And they're just like, wait, that's a thing, or that's a problem, or why is that a problem, or why are you even worried about that, or what, um, it's kind of, I feel like that's kind of like when somebody of privilege doesn't understand the struggles of somebody that, has those intersectional identities and face oppression. Um, and so yeah, what keeps me coming back is, that sense of community, but like how there's not this like set of social expectations of how you're supposed to show up and behave. That said, obviously you guys keep it safe and, and redirect or, set boundaries around, like what people can say to each other,
Yeah, you need those sort of social norm rules to be
Right.
explicit so that everybody is playing by the same set of
Right.
rules.
Especially since so many of us have trauma histories, right? So
Mhm.
like that stuff can show up and activate that. And, like I remember that happening.
Mhm.
So, and not, like in, in a couple of those groups. And having a facilitator that's willing to take that feedback and, like, and when I give feedback around that, right, like I'll depending on, so I'll acknowledge, like, if I get activated, I'll like, not, but I've done a lot of therapy and
Right.
a lot of, and I have a lot of uh uh information because of my professional background and educational, right, like things that I've learned, but not everybody's going to have that, right? And so like it ends up like being, I feel like my ability to do, like, respond, react in a calmer, right, like in a, like, even if I'm activated, I, like, I can still be like, hey, here's this boundary, and not like have it escalate into this emotional mess.
Which
And
takes some work.
right. But like, also, like, I feel like, uh in some ways it's, how do I want to say this? uh I I I worry, or I wonder if it relieves the, uh I'm trying to think of a diplomatic word to say, the offender, right? Like the one that says
Yeah.
something offensive, um, with a little less accountability because of that, or like, so I worry about that a little bit, of like, if I'm too diplomatic, does it get, well, might it get interpreted as not as big of a deal? But I'm trying not to like amplify and escalate a situation, and so like I try
Mhm.
to keep it pretty neutral when I'm like, hey, you probably, or you might not have meant it this way, but when you just said this in response to me sharing this, it felt like, or my it sat in my body as, my feelings getting minimized, or that, I was overreacting, and this ended up activating a bunch of my old stuff because of not ever feeling heard growing up or something, right? Like, um, and and of course, right, that, like, part of that, I'm like, oh, this is not a therapy group, right? And so it's like,
Right.
how do you talk about like your feelings getting stepped on in this group without like it risking that? And if it, right, so I try to give people the benefit of the doubt when, especially since we're like often like really awkward and not necessarily thinking of how somebody else might take something. We're just like, oh, this thing popped into my head in response to this thing that got said, and I didn't filter it before it came out, right? Super, super common, especially if you have like that level of impulsivity there too, right?
Mhm.
And especially if you're part of demographic that hasn't historically been required to do that. Um, and so, right, like, I guess I'm citing some challenges that can come up, and what might make people hesitant to join, but I still feel like it's worth it, even in the light of the risk of that happening, because, and I think it's worked out too when that feedback has happened, because I think like the folks that had done that were, was indeed an honest mistake, or they were able to be redirected, and and
Yeah.
work on those skills, and be willing to work on those skills, and not in a, like, and again, right, this kind of ties back into like that whole behavioral intervention thing. It's like, sometimes, yes, we do have to work on skills in order to facilitate us being kind to others, right? It's not just you need to behave more neurotypically. It's whoa, okay, when this is said like this this is offensive, here are some other ways to do this. And like, uh and also, like, if somebody is wanting to get their point across, like, don't they want to present it in the way that it's going to be the best received? And
Yeah.
so if they present it offensively, like, people are not going to listen, they're going to shut down and not listen. And so then their actual goal isn't actually going to be met if they continue to do it that way, or insist on doing it that way. But yeah, and I think, so kind of going back to the, why do I attend support groups, right? So like, why do I attend so many specifically? But right, like, I said like what each of the different ones kind of
Mhm.
how they differed. And but yeah, the main thing is like that shared sense of community, and just, yeah, like, I like hearing other people's stories, and not so that I can help them cope with it or anything like that, but just like to have that sense of not feeling so alone in my experience, right? Because yeah, like, when you're in it, and you're, especially when it's like in the seat of being criticized, you're like, I'm the one that's messed up, or I'm the one that's abnormal and wrong, and I'm the one that needs fixed, right?
Because
And
that's what
why?
society tells
Yeah,
us. Hmm.
yeah. And so to have that group there, and I especially love in yours where you're like, you don't have to apologize. uh,
No. Mm.
and I've often
No.
been like, I'm sorry for saying sorry.
Hmm. Well, I just want people to understand that, your opinions, your thoughts, and your feelings are valid, and you shouldn't have to apologize for that. And I also recognize that as autistic people, more often than not, we're conditioned to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
so many times I have opened my mouth and said something I probably shouldn't have because I didn't mean it the way I said it. And I have to apologize for something I've done and said. And not because of anything I've actually done and said, but because of how somebody else has interpreted the meaning or
Mm-hmm.
context behind something that I've done and said. And instead of asking me about the context and the why, they just assume and move on. And then you don't even know you did anything wrong for like
Mm-hmm.
months.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like one of the hardest ones is like, and it's usually it comes from somebody's own stuff, right? So from their past and their trauma, where, like, yeah, you'll say something, or you'll ask a question. This is what it classically happens for me, is I won't understand something, or I won't understand the why the person is doing something, or why they responded to me the way they responded to me, or something like that. And I'll be like, why are you doing it this way? Or why are you doing this thing? Or when is this going to happen? And then they'll perceive it as an attack or criticism, right? And I'll be like, wait, what? Like, why are you,
Mhm.
they'll be like, why are you giving me a hard time about this? And I'm like, huh? I'm like, I'm just asking for this extra detail that I don't have. Right. And you see a lot of like TikToks and reels and things on social media now of like from autistic influencers
Yeah.
that are like along those lines. And I'm always like sending them to friends going, oh, hey, wait, look, it's me again. Oh, you know, or ones that like we've talked about together before of like, hey, we're not alone. Or, oh, this looks like my day. Yeah, where it's like or like if you'll like somebody's trying to is giving you instructions to do something, or like they asked you to do something but like it was vague, right?
Mhm.
Like, hey, can you make sure the house is clean, right? Like I was like trying to think of like what's a really really general one that's like there's so much involved in it. And it's like, okay, am I supposed to clean the whole house?
What
Or
level of cleaning do
right,
you
like
need?
like which things are the highest priorities here, because I don't
Mhm.
think I'm gonna get the whole thing done. And or like if you attempt to try to get the whole thing done, they're like, I didn't mean clean the whole house, like there was no time to do all that. Right, and you're like, well, how was I supposed to know? You just said make sure the house is clean, right? Like um or you know, yeah, or again, right, I feel like this ties into that literature thing of like when stuff is said, and this is more like that neurotypical neurodivergent cross communication thing and the double empathy problem of like, you know, a neurotypical requests help, but they're not saying it in such a way that is like an actual question. It's like an announcement almost, or feel, or like that's how it ends up landing for me. And it's like, hey, I could use some help with blank, right? And then you're like, okay.
Yep. Mhm. Need more context, please. Mhm.
Right, here, you know, and I think kind of picture this like uh biplane going across the sky with a banner saying so and so could use some
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. Yep.
Happy birthday, right?
Mhm.
Sorry.
You're
uh
good. Dr. Jamie,
and
we've been at this for 2 hours.
and so it's like, okay, and then it's like, wait, okay, that's them asking for help, right? You know, and so but like it takes a minute because you're like, wait, this wasn't a question. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
they're by saying it, they're asking for help, right, and so it's like it takes that extra time, um you know, and again, right, like that's all these steps of translation because that's not how we phrase things necessarily, and then it's like, okay, wait, so do they want me to help them, or there's like 5 other people in this room, so did they
But
have
no one's
somebody in
explicit.
mind? Is
Mhm.
it supposed to be, or is just one of us supposed to volunteer, or what? You know, like, and so there's a lot more, like, it's a lot more decision making that I like that I feel pressured to make, right? And that I like a lot more, uh,
And that neurotypical people just can make.
right, and they're like, oh, that mean this, I should just do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it, da da da, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, but like, you know, and again, right, this is part of like what is informed of like the trauma history too, of like those other experiences that you've been uh through where you did make that assumption and it went wrong, right? And so
Yeah.
those pop up in your memory and you're like, oh, okay, wait, do I just offer to help? Because when I've offered to help in these other situations, stuff hit the fan
Mhm.
and the people told me I was getting in the way. Is this going to be like that? What are the cues in this environment right now that indicate that? Are there any that indicate that? Is it safe to offer?
And
Right? And so
then
then we
yep,
overthink it. It's like
all the
I'm
time.
I'm not trying
Mhm.
to be unhelpful. I'm just overthinking this whole process. And by worrying so much about trying not to make you mad, I'm ending up making you mad because I'm taking too long to decide. And yeah, it's like, I mean, I feel like that's like one way to sum up the autistic
Yeah.
experience in the neurotypical world, or at least the communication piece. Like, what's this?
Mhm.
Yeah. And I often feel like, you know, again, like using that foreign language example of like, it's like when you, even if you've learned a foreign language, it's still hard to go over to that country and try to speak to the native speakers because
Yeah.
you're like, you've learned Americanized academic German, right? Or whatever, so it's like,
And based on where you are in the country and the different dialects and all
yeah,
that. Yep.
yeah. So it's like, okay, can I ask where the doctor is? Yeah.
We're going to put a pin in this one,
Okay.
Dr. Jamie. We've been at it for 2 hours now.
Obviously,
and I
like
could go on
sometimes
for another 2 hours, but
yeah, I was gonna say I could talk forever, but I can also shut up.
No,
I'm not saying shut up. You're saying
we're saying that we're going to table this conversation and continue it again because I love these conversations. I just know my listeners cut out after 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm like, maybe like publish in 2 segments, right?
No, people will listen to this whole thing straight up.
I worry that people check out after like me talking for 15 minutes.
You'd be surprised.
Well, it's good. Maybe again, I'm projecting my conversations in those other situations. No, I appreciate talking to you. Like you bring up a subject and I'm like, oh, here's what pops into my head about this subject.
And that's why I love this podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. Thank